Hello, my name's Roisin, and sometimes you just need a short book. Hello friends, and welcome to another recommendations video. So there are a few reasons why I thought it might be good to recommend some really short books to you today. One reason is because in the UK it looks like we might be heading back into a national lockdown, which means that there is more time for reading, generally speaking. But also alongside that, there is a lot of anxiety in the world right now for multiple reasons, and so you might find that you are struggling to concentrate on a longer epic book. I know I certainly do sometimes, so a short book is a good recommendation. And then also, we are rapidly hurtling towards the final quarter of the year, and maybe you aren't up to date with your Goodreads goal, or whatever goal you set yourself this year, your Storygraph goal perhaps, and you need some short books to help you along. Or maybe you just really like short books, and that's fine too. But whatever your reasoning, I have lots of good recommendations for you today. When I first thought about short books, I thought poetry, obviously. Poetry collections are always really short, and you can definitely read an entire collection in one day. I am planning to make a video that is my top 10 poetry collections of all time very soon. If you're watching this after I've put that out, I will put it in the cards, but I thought I would just recommend a couple that I've read this year and really loved. So the first one is Black Movie by Denez Smith, which is actually a poetry pamphlet, so it is not as long as a full collection. You can definitely read it in an hour or so. Denez Smith is a poet that I found out because of BookTube, because they have been very popular. They are a black non-binary poet from the US, and they write a lot about the Black American experience. So you may have heard of their collections Don't Call Us Dead and Homie, but Black Movie was their first collection that I read, and it is about the Black experience in America told through the lens of pop culture. My favourite poem in this book was a poem about how Denez wanted to make a movie that was a combination of Boys in the Hood and Jurassic Park, and it started with a young black boy playing with a Tyrannosaurus Rex toy. There was so much joy and love and also politics in this story, and I think that that's one of Denez's strengths. They can really combine popular culture references, funny comedy, sharp, quick rhythms with this heart and also this politics. It really makes you think whilst also making you laugh. The other collection that I wanted to recommend was The Handless Maiden by Vicki, Feaver. This was a collection recommended to me by one of my tutors when I was studying for my Masters in Creative and Life Writing. It is a collection that is mostly retellings of stories from various mythological and folkloric traditions about women. The title poem, The Handless Maiden, is from German folklore tradition. It's a collection of poetry about the plight of women, about violence against women, with really beautiful, visceral, intense writing. The imagery is stunning in this poetry collection, and I would definitely recommend it. I also really love short non-fiction. I find that sometimes it can be a really helpful way into a topic, and also allows you to get a broad understanding of something, or a very specific understanding of something, without being too in-depth necessarily. It allows you to gain knowledge of a specific writer's writing style, thoughts and opinions, which can lead you to read some of their longer work. So I have 3 non-fiction recommendations for you. The first one is Why I Write by George Orwell, which I do have a copy of, but I have no idea where it's gone. This is a singular essay by George Orwell that details his journey to becoming a writer, and also it talks about politics in writing and why he feels like it is important to write in a political way, or why he feels like his politics really influences his writing. It's just one little essay, but George Orwell is a great writer. He is very good at making everything very clear and succinct, and I really enjoyed this work. There is another George Orwell coming up later, because he is very good if you want to read something quickly or something short. Then I also have Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. This is a collection of interviews, speeches and essays from Angela Davis about the Black Lives Matter movement, the Palestinian rights movement, and feminism and prison abolition. It covers a broad range of topics, but it's not too heavy or in-depth in regards to any of them. It is a strong introduction to Angela Davis's thoughts without being too academic. It's very accessible, despite the fact that Angela Davis is a great academic. And I think the fact that it's interviews and speeches really helps with accessibility if you're not someone who reads political non-fiction a lot. Angela Davis has a lot to say, and she is a very interesting and inspiring woman, and I would definitely recommend this. The other interesting and inspiring black academic feminist lesbian that I would like to recommend to you is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. This is one of the non-fictions that completely blew my mind open. this year. I feel like I often read older feminist texts, and while I enjoy them and they are great, they are useful as an understanding of foundations from where writers have moved on, they are often not so urgent and immediate because they are 30, 40, 50 years old, or 150 years old. With Audre Lorde, I found it was really immediate, engaging, and out of time. Politics is so often of the time and written with an urgency of a moment, but Sister Outsider felt like it was outside of a moment and more universal. Unfortunately, talking about things that still exist, like her raising a black son and how she felt about that, and about white feminists and how they interact with and belittle and steal from black feminists, and also a really interesting essay about her visit to the Soviet Union during the 1970s, because a lot of what we hear about the Soviet Union is from an American and Western society propaganda aspect. And whilst Audre Lorde is not uncritical of the Soviet Union, because obviously there is a lot to be critical of, she's not critical in the same way that the propaganda is outlandish and over the top. Next, I have some short fiction for you that I have loved recently. Most of these I have read this year, in fact. I've definitely got into reading short fiction more recently. So the first one is Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, by Cho Nam Joo, which is the story of a woman, Kim Jiyoung, who's growing up in South Korea, and she has a mental breakdown. Right at the very beginning, we know she has a mental breakdown, and then we go back and see throughout her life. Kim Jiyoung is the most common name for a woman in South Korea born in the 80s, and so it is She Isn't Every Woman. It is about the experience of women in South Korea, and it is written in such an interesting academic way with footnotes, and at the end there is a twist that really blew my mind. So I would definitely persevere through this, because you can read it in a day. It's very, very short, so even if you're not quite getting on with the style of the writing, I feel like it is worth it, because the end will make everything come together for you like it did for me. I also have this year read Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig. So if you're into thrillers and like dystopia, this is a short version of that I think is really, really good. It is so atmospheric. It is about a Native American reservation in Canada where all of the power goes out, the internet goes down, the phone lines go down, everything is cut out, and they don't know why. And then all of a sudden these white people start arriving, and they want to live with the Native Americans and like gain access to their knowledge and their resources. So it is a comment on colonialism, and it is also a really good, haunting, stressful read. It is not very long, but it's very, very tense throughout, and it's incredibly beautifully written. The atmosphere is so strong in this book. Now for a nice cozy one, and that is The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie's fiction in general tends to be quite short, so if you want a cozy mystery, I would definitely recommend her books generally, but The ABC Murders is the one that I've read most recently, and I really enjoyed. It is a fun camp romp. It is set in the 1930s. It is about a murder. It has Poirot. It is very, very funny, and also very clever. I did know how it was going to turn out because I've seen adaptations of it, but I definitely think that it is worth a read, and if you like cozy mysteries, then I would recommend this one. Next is a romance, so I'm really spanning the genres here with my recommendations, and that is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. Again, Tessa Dare tends to write quite short fiction. Her novels are short, and she also writes novellas. So if you like romance, I would definitely recommend this, particularly if you like historical romance. The Duchess Deal is a Beauty and the Beast retelling about a woman called Emma who is a seamstress and the Duke of Ashbury, who they meet because Emma sewed his ex-fiance's wedding dress and she wants to be paid for her wedding dress, and she turns up in his house and he needs a wife because he needs an heir, and so he offers to marry her. He has been disfigured by a blast in the Napoleonic Wars, and he has burns all up at one side of his body, and he is quite brusque. It is very, very funny romance. There is a lot of comedy and humour in it. It's also very sexy and steamy, if that is something you like, and I would recommend the audiobook as well, because the audiobook actress does a very, very good job. And then in my fiction section, I would recommend Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. This is a semi-autobiographical novel about Jeanette's experience growing up adopted by a highly religious community in the north of England, and her experience realising that she is a lesbian, having feelings for a girl that she has brought into their congregation, and her experience of that. It is kind of slightly magical realist with lots of dreams that have a lot of heavy religious overtones, and it is very, very beautifully written, also funny despite the tragedy and the difficulties that Jeanette experiences. And probably the longest book on this list, but at a 6-hour audiobook, that's how I'm testing how long it is. I definitely think you could get through it in a day. And then finally, I would like to recommend some classics for you, because while classics often seem very intimidating, short classics are a great way to get into them, and also they can be very enjoyable if read in the day. The first two I read a long time ago, but I definitely enjoyed them at the time. And so that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is incredibly famous and incredibly short. This is the story of Nick Carraway, who moves to the East Egg in New York, and he meets Jay Gatsby, who is his neighbour, who throws these lavish parties and is the talk of the town, and nobody really knows anything about his history or his past. And then we meet Nick's cousin Daisy Buchanan, who lives across the other side of the water, and it is about their interactions, it is about the jazz age, it's about decadence, it's about people missing each other, and it is about the lives that we create for ourselves. It is incredibly beautifully written. It is a kind of airy, feels like nothing of a novel, and then underneath so much is happening and so much is going on. There is a lot to get your teeth into in such a very short space of time, and I would definitely recommend it. The other one is Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, which is about Holly Golightly and a man who moves in to her apartment building and becomes intrigued by this young woman who throws parties and seems to be having such a wonderful time, and she's so singular and unusual, and he doesn't quite know what she's going to do next. It is a very, very sad novel, incredibly sad, and is set in the middle of the 20th century. It is very beautifully written again, and so poignant that I would definitely recommend it for those reasons. And then I mentioned that George Orwell would come up again, and the one that I'm recommending as a short book to read is Animal Farm, which is an allegory about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917, told through the aspect of farm animals. It is clever and witty and short and tragic, and really interesting look at the ideas of socialism and the corruption thereof through the Soviet Union, and I think it is definitely one that is worth a read. Very, very short, but very accessible for a classic and for such a political book. And then finally, two plays. Plays are always very, very short if you read them, because it's mostly dialogue, and I definitely think that you can get a great experience from reading a play, even if it's not the same as seeing it performed. So the two I would recommend. The first one is Medea by Euripides. This is my favourite classic Greek tragedy, and if you are interested in Greek tragedy or Greek literature at all and are looking to read anything, I would say that Medea is very, very accessible and the one to go for. Euripides in general, I would say, is personally my favourite, but Medea definitely is the one to go for, I would say. This is the story of Medea, a woman who helped Jason from Jason and the Argonauts in his trials, and then they get to this island and he's going to marry her. They have 2 children together, but he abandons her in order to marry the princess of this island, and so Medea seeks to get her revenge. It is one that I would definitely recommend reading an introduction to, because because it would help you to understand the context of the play. It's one that I think that stands up still to the test of time, which often Greek plays, especially Greek comedies, you're just like, why? But with this one, I think that it definitely is still one that is worth reading, and that is why it is still performed so often. It's got such strong, powerful monologues from Medea. There are 2 monologues from Medea that are really, really powerful, and I would definitely recommend you read. And then finally, the final play I'm going to recommend is The Tempest by William Shakespeare. All Shakespeare is very short, so you could read any of them that you fancy, but The Tempest is one of my favourites, along with, well, I have several others, but I'm recommending The Tempest right now. The Tempest is the story of Prospero and Miranda, Prospero was a duke in Italy, and he was tricked out of his dukedom and ended up shipwrecked on this island, and he was also a magician, and he and his daughter live on this island until he causes another ship to crash that has the people who tricked him out of his duchy, and also their son Ferdinand, and several other characters who land on the island. And there's also a sprite called Ariel, and a kind of, I'm not sure what kind of creature he is, but Caliban also is on the island. It is one with incredibly beautiful writing. Lots of things that we quote come from The Tempest. And I think that the writing is so beautiful. The story is also one that I love. I love the lightly magical aspect of it, and it being outside of time, because it is set in this place that is not quite Earth. So I would definitely recommend that. So that is all of my short book recommendations. I hope you found something that you would like to read on this list. Please let me know in the comments what your favourite short books are, because those I am more likely to be able to fit in between now and the end of the year. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and to subscribe, because I put out new videos every Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. So I will see you again soon. Bye bye! Which I have somewhere, but I don't know what I've done with it. Okay, sorry, there's a child on the garages running towards my garden. They lost their frisbee. This is the story of, what's her name?